2017 was a rough year for me. Kind of, my life fell apart. I was in Colorado for a while, working in Denver. Truck got totaled. We were hit by a couple vehicles. It was just a rough situation for me and Gracie. And kind of at the end of October, I was working construction. We were slinging glass, curtain walls, and it was no fun. So at the end of October, I had the itch. I was like, I got to get back to Maine. I'm about to just pull the strings on this and just go.
Welcome back to another episode of Northwoods Whitetails Podcast. I'm your host, Joey Davis, and I got a special guest today, Corey Ryder.
Hello.
This is going to be a little short episode that we're going to do. We're on our way to do another podcast. Corey, what's going on?
We're on the road and heading to meet up with Brent and who's the other guy?
Dwayne Merrill.
That should be a good one, but we're getting one on the fly.
Yeah, we sure are. We're in the truck, headed to pick them up. So you just showed me some bucks. Let's pick a story and talk about one.
So this is sort of a continuation of the last podcast that I did with you guys. This is kind of going to be the following years after I shot my biggest buck in 2015. So the next year, 2016, of course, I wanted to go back and hunt the same spot. And I don't remember all the circumstances, but I got there and there was no snow. But I wanted to kind of hunt up the same area, the same mountain, and there was this old trail that went up there and no snow, completely calm and still evening. You could hear for miles, it seemed, and it was in the evening, so I wanted to just sneak up. It was crunchy leaves, dry, those conditions. Walking through the woods is basically fruitless. They can hear you coming. So I ended up I was going to wear just socks, but I put my running shoes on as I had my running shoes, and they were quiet enough. So
you were going to wear just socks?
Yeah. And so
okay.
Because when I shot the buck, it was this area that I shot that big buck in 2015, and he came to the grunting and all of that, and he was fighting the other buck. The first day I had shot at that other 200-pounder and missed, and so I had seen enough of their patterns in that area and the scrape lines and everything that I wanted to try this. So I ended up putting my running shoes on, and I was just sneaking along this road. I was making no noise. I was stepping in the soft gravel with those shoes. It wasn't making any noise. So I'd go about 100 to 200 yards very slowly, and I would doe bleat and grunt. And I was doing that, and about halfway up, I heard this buck coming. I didn't have much time. It was getting towards the end of the day. This buck I heard him coming from a long way off, crunching through those leaves. And my mistake was that I was totally exposed, kind of standing in the middle of that trail on a high spot, where I should have had some form of cover, anything. Just step behind a bush, or I was out in the open, and I heard him coming, and he got within probably 50 yards. He was right through in the thick brush on the side, and I couldn't see him, and he stopped, and it was. I knew he was hung up, and I just froze. I didn't want to move or do anything. And after a while, and I knew he was grilling me. I knew he could see me, and I could slowly hear him stepping sideways. So he was trying to get downwind of me. There was the slightest breeze ever, and he did. He worked his way downwind to where he caught my scent and ghosted me, gone. But I put that in the back of my mind, like, man, this almost worked. I couldn't believe it. I grunted like I was doing, and that buck, he came in. I always wondered what that buck was because it sounded mean. So I can't remember the rest I did in 2016. Probably chased a big buck somewhere else. And so coming to 2017 was a rough year for me. Kind of my life fell apart. I was in Colorado for a while, working in Denver. Truck got totaled. We were hit by a couple vehicles. It was just a rough situation for me and Gracie. And kind of at the end of October, I was working construction. We were slinging glass, curtain walls, and it was no fun. So at the end of October, I had the itch. I was like, I got to get back to Maine. I'm about to just pull the strings on this and just go. And I did. And I gunned it for Vermont first so I could leave Gracie with my mom to take care. My mom always takes care of Gracie during hunting season. And so, I mean, nonstop going for it. I remember I drank a coffee and a Red Bull. I never drink energy drinks, but I had to. And I got on the ferry to cross over from New York to Grand Isle. And I was the first vehicle on the ferry. And I passed out. I woke up, the ferry attendant rapping on the window. The ferry had cleared out.
Son, get the hell off.
Yeah, all the vehicles had gone around me. And so I was that tired. So I go and I drop off Gracie, and then I head to Maine the next day. And I don't know if it was opening day or the day after. It might have been opening day. And my plan was really I was just going to get out in the woods where I wanted to go and just hunt the evening if I had any time, but then just camp in the truck. And I think it was supposed to snow, and I was just going to wait on the snow. And, so I bought my license, and I go I'm just screaming, getting out into the woods. And I get out there, and same thing. I go to the same spot, and it's in the evening. I'm going to go up that road again. And it's more of a trail now. It's grown in so much, And so same thing. I put the running shoes on, and I'm doing that thing. I'm going over 200 yards, and I'm grunting and bleeding, and I'm doing that, and I go all the way up to the end of that road. It's probably a mile and a half, and I was really shocked that I didn't hear anything. I didn't see anything. No moose. I couldn't even see any tracks in the gravel, so I was kind of concerned that maybe they weren't traveling through there anymore. So I got to the end. Towards the end, that trail kind of did a 90-degree turn. So at the end, I turn around, and I'm coming back, and I had grunted the whole mile and a half every 200 yards. And I'm coming back, and I get to that turn, and I turn the corner, and there's a buck standing in that trail, looking right at me. He was coming to me. It's in my foot tracks. And he's just looking at me, and he has half an ear ripped up, and I could tell by his physique that's a 200-pound buck. There's no doubt about it. He looked jacked, just big shoulders, big neck, but I could tell he had no brow tines, and he wasn't very wide. And I hesitated, thinking, man, I don't know. It's very early. I don't know how big this buck is rack-wise. I know he's 200 pounds. And but I was not sure about it. And after a while, probably 10, 15 seconds, he turned his head to the side, and I could see that he had 4 points on one side. And then he turned back and looked at me, and I knew he wasn't going to give me much more opportunity. If I was going to take him, I needed to do it. And I knew he was a 200-pound buck, and I just drilled him. He made, straight on, right through the heart, and he made one bound off that trail and died. And so I go over there, and he was, 7-pointer, 3 on one side, 4 on the other, big-bodied deer, young deer, and I was thrilled. It was awesome, but then it was also, my season was over, and I hadn't even hunted on snow yet. You know the feeling. Mm-hmm. And so I took him to report him and everything, and I said, they asked if they were like, oh, this is 200 pounds. Do you want to weigh him, get your patch and all that? I said, no, I don't even care. I didn't have time for all that. I said, I don't even care about the weight. Let's just go. And I was trying to get to my buddy's place so that I could hunt New Hampshire the next day. And so I ended up getting to my buddy's place. And the next day he had, we put the buck up on his scale, on his hanging pole and everything, and it was 200 pounds. And so that was cool. So then the following year, and that was the same spot as that 11-pointer that I shot, that I told you about previously. So it's all the same spot that this occurred. The following year, 2018, I think it was around November 14th. It was like mid-November. We hadn't had any snow, but then there was this big storm coming, and everyone was getting excited about it. The hunting hadn't been good yet. No one had been able to track, and here's the first big storm, and it's going to be going. Like, everyone knew, like, it's killer conditions. It's going to be a blizzard. If you can find a big buck track, you're just going to walk up and shake his hand. You know, it's that good. And so I made arrangements. You know, I said, you know, in these conditions and everything, sleeping in the truck wasn't very appealing.
Yeah.
You know, so I found a place I could stay, meals, all that stuff, close enough where I wanted to be. And so I arranged for the whole week to stay there and everything. And I drove through. The snowstorm started the evening before, and I drove through all that, and I got there super late. And the guy had shot, I think the day before, maybe 2 days before, a 222-pound, I can't remember what it had, beautiful rack, really nice buck. The owner of this establishment, really nice buck. And so, and he couldn't, you know, I was the only one staying there in the whole place, so, which is good for me, you know, that's how I like it. And so the next morning, I get up, you know, it's that's snow and everything, and I knew where I wanted to go. I wanted to go back to where that trail that goes up the mountain, and I had actually found a signpost over there the year I shot that big one, the 11-pointer, and I put a camera there, and I had 3 really big bucks on the camera, and 2 were over 200 pounds. I could judge by the body size, and the one with the biggest rack was not 200 pounds, but it was over 160 inches. And I know that because that deer ended up getting shot later on by someone else. So I knew I wanted to get to that spot. So I head out super early in the morning, you know me, and I'm going, and the snow was so heavy. I mean, it's probably snowed 12 inches, and it was it was like driving through concrete, and the truck wouldn't do it.
Is it wet?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, the back end was too light, and I couldn't, so I had to drive in reverse.
How far did you drive in reverse?
A lot, like miles. I was like, there's no way I'm getting there. And that was the only way, you know, so that, and I pushed.
Because you'd have to back up, go forward, or what? Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it had to be, it was miles in reverse, you know. I don't want to give out a number, but it was a long way in reverse, and, you know, my neck hurt and everything, you know. And so, and I finally get to where I wanted to find a track, and sure enough, here's this giant buck track following a doe. I couldn't believe it. It's the wind was howling, and so that any track you'd find would be smoking fresh, and it's following a doe, and they're going up the mountain, coming from where I had the camera on the side. So I thought, hey, it's definitely one of those 3 bucks, and any one of them is a buck that I would be thrilled to shoot, you know. And so, and I knew it was 200 pounds, so yep, this is happening. And I got on the track, and it was like knee-deep snow. It was hard to walk through. You know, you could barely move, but I knew if I could just keep punching through it, I was going to catch up to him eventually.
Yeah, he didn't want to go anywhere either.
No, and it looked like they were going to be on top of the mountain, and that's kind of what I was expecting. But kind of halfway up, I cut their tracks coming down, and so I knew I was right there. Like, they some reason they came down and crossed their tracks again, and now I'm right behind them. And I maybe went 20 yards, and I kind of peeked through some beach whips, and I could see that buck standing there maybe 20 yards, just looking straight at me. And I could see the base of the antlers and the brow tines. That's all I could see, but I knew it was that buck. So I pulled up, and, you know, you picture where to aim in your mind all the time, right? You picture that vital spot, you know, behind the shoulder. You go through that again and again, over and over in your mind, so that you're ready for that. So instinctively, reflexively, as I pull up and aim, right, there's probably a I don't know, 8-inch beech covering that spot, but I slammed one right into that, and it did not go through. And that deer goes full tilt, screaming down the mountain, and my second shot on the fly just punched him right through the heart.
How far was he?
Probably 50 yards at that point.
Yep.
And then my third shot actually hit him just below that, kind of in the shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
And he snowplowed and stunned. So, I go walking up to him, and you knew it was that the deer I was tracking, a 200-pound buck and everything. First thing I realized, this is not any of those 3 deer that I had pictures on the camera of, it surprised me for whatever reason. And I was like, wow, that's a big buck. And I think I did a real, bad quality cell phone after the fact video of that buck that I put on the channel. But so I ended up getting him out. It was a pretty easy one with those conditions. Went pretty good on the snow. And
I bet he did.
He weighed 218, and I showed back up at the place, and they couldn't believe it that I just got it done so quickly like that. They thought, like, how did you just do this? They were just super impressed.
Yeah.
And they wanted me to put it up on the game pole next to his 222-pounder, and for their advertising and show, hey, it's 1 week, 200-pounders and all that. And back in those days, I was all tried to be under the radar and low key and all that. And I was no, I don't want the attention. And then people will say, oh, well, you stayed at this place, so this is the area, and blah blah blah. You know how it goes. Yeah. And so I didn't do that, but yeah, no, that was a good hunt. So, I've hunted that spot for a few years in a row, and I've shot 3 200-pound bucks, and where I connected with all 3 and got them was. It had to be within no more than a quarter mile where I connected with all 3. I mean, they range. I'm saying they range all over, but where I ended up, for whatever reason, connecting with them ended up being within that same little quarter mile.
Just the way it worked out.
Yeah.
Sounds like you got yourself a little honey hole.
I actually haven't hunted there for a while. He's changed a lot as the woods do. They're dynamic and everything. But, the interesting thing about that buck, and we got the rack right here, and it's it's a heavy rack. I don't know if it was an old deer. I don't think it was an old deer. I actually think it was a young deer. It's got mass. It's kind of got this webbed on one side. It's an 8-pointer, gnarly bases. It's a cool buck. But when I was tracking him, see here, his behavior was strange to me, and his behavior is what indicated to me that it wasn't a super mature deer. And that's the thing. When it comes to tracking, everyone focuses on the size of the footprint, the width of the stagger, the length of the stride. And those are the objective measurements of a buck track. But the behavior of that buck, how he moves through the woods, how he acts, the subjective thing, that tells a different story. That adds another level of information, because you want not only a big buck, you want a mature buck. When you can apply both the objective findings and the subjective, how's this buck act? Mm-hmm. You want that old buck that moves through the woods efficiently, doesn't lose his mind like a young buck that's just bolt through a china shop looking for a doe. Like this buck, an old buck knows what he's doing. He's going to take his time. He's going to go at a pace where he can go all day. He knows the game. He's done it before. It's not his first rut, Mm-hmm. And you can tell those subtle things in the subjective. If you've followed enough buck tracks, after a while you start to learn how to read not only the objective information but the subjective thing. The behavior is really important. And this buck, the way he behaved when I was tracking him, which it wasn't a very long track, this is going to be your turn up here. Okay. You got to turn to the right and then come back across.
Gotcha.
He lost the doe track. Like he caught her and she ran off from him, and he stopped and peed on his hocks and hit a little bush like he was very frustrated, which to me, and I could be wrong on this, but to me it was like, oh, he's really horned up and he's very frustrated, like a young buck. And I say young, like, 4.5-year-old maybe, which, I guess
would say he's 4.5.
I guess what I think, mature buck is like at least 5.5, 6.5, that sort of thing. It's relative, but
Yep.
It's just the way he acted. And then I also had an indication that he might not have a super wide rack because he did go through some narrow stuff, but I had no doubt he's 200 pounds. And, that's what I was going for. So it's all these experiences that I learn from and apply to future hunts that, it's how you learn and grow and how you improve. And I'm still learning,
And I think we all are.
Yeah. So that's basically, what I wanted to share with you as far as the buck stories.
That's an awesome story. Well, thanks, guys, for joining us. We'll be doing more of these little shorts, so stay tuned. Have a good one.